The sound of Karen's scream bounced off the tunnel walls, just like something from a horror movie, you know? The water was already up to their waists, and those fancy SUVs the HOA board drove were practically underwater, nose first. One of them was pounding on the windows, while another was hollering into a walkie-talkie that was probably dead as a doornail. Me? I was just sitting up on the concrete ledge of the tunnel, casually drinking my sweet tea, like it was a Sunday afternoon picnic. Yep, that's me all right. You're probably wondering how I ended up here, and why the president of the Willowgate HOA is currently stuck in my private tunnel, all wet and freaked out, getting ready to find out what poetic justice really means. So, let's go back a bit, okay? It all started with this peace and quiet, you know? Something only land that's been in your family for a while can give you. That kinda calm got passed down to me, like a family secret. My grandpa bought this place back in '46, after he got back from the war. Back then, the county had more cows than cars. He built this tunnel himself, or, well, he paid some local guys with cash, beer, and pie to dig it. It was wide enough for the cattle, horses, and an old tractor to go under the county road, which was just smart, you know, so he didn't have to drag the livestock across the asphalt. Over time, it became more than just a way to cross the road. It was a connection between pastures, a secret shortcut between the barn and the backfield. And for me? It was just a well-kept piece of country infrastructure. When he passed, I left my city job, I worked in marketing, can you believe it? And bought his tools off my cousins. I kept the place in shape, fixed the hinges on the steel gates, and kept the bushes trimmed around the entrance. That tunnel was mine, along with those 28 acres that wrapped around the edge of Willowgate Estates, that gated community that looked like it was spit out of a catalog and dropped right in the middle of nowhere. We never really had problems until they started on Phase 4. At first, there were just those survey trucks. Then some bored teenagers on e-bikes. Then, one day, I saw this plastic stake stuck into the edge of my fence, like a little red warning flag. I pulled it up, threw it in the trash, and didn't think much of it. But within 2 weeks, my pasture gate, the one leading to the tunnel, had fresh orange spray paint all over the ground in front of it. And then, here came the gravel trucks. I got home from hauling feed one afternoon and found them paving over the old livestock path, filling the ruts with this crushed limestone stuff, and running a plate compactor all over what used to be hoof trails. At first, I thought it was a utility easement job, gone wrong. Then I saw the contractor's shirts. They didn't have county logos on them. They had the HOA's Willowgate Improvement Committee printed in blocky white letters on navy polos, like they were some kind of suburban, well, you know. I just stood there, my mouth hanging open, as some guy with a clipboard started rattling off permit codes, saying the tunnel had been absorbed into the community's multi-use trail plan. Absorbed? That tunnel was older than their whole darn neighborhood. I told them to stop, but they just smiled and nodded an S. They also said I could contact Karen if I had any questions, you know? Karen Mitchell, the HOA president, who used to sell houses, but now she's the self-proclaimed ruler of the cul-de-sac kingdom. I tried to get a hold of her. Emails bounced right back. Her assistant wouldn't give me her personal number, and then those jerks ripped my gate right off the hinges. One morning, I drove out to check on the fence down south and found the steel tubing I'd welded myself lying in the weeds, cut right at the bottom, like a fallen tree. Instead of the gate, there was just a big, gaping hole, like they were inviting everyone in. They'd paved the inside of the tunnel too, put in those solar-powered lights along the concrete arch, and, get this, they installed a keypad access system on the other side. I couldn't even walk through the tunnel without getting buzzed in, like I was the pizza guy. The worst part? They didn't even ask. Not even once. They just acted like it was theirs. I found out later they'd filed some emergency access integration request with the county, hitching a ride on a school bus reroute application from 2 years ago. It was hidden in the paperwork, you know, the stuff nobody actually reads. And once the tunnel was ready, they took out the original road into Willowgate, that long, winding road that went through the hills. I watched them tear it apart like a snake shedding its skin. The asphalt got chewed up and hauled away, until there was nothing left but dirt and dead weeds. Now the only way to get in or out of the whole neighborhood was through my tunnel. My private, deed-protected, livestock access tunnel. What used to be a quick shortcut for me was now a traffic jam of minivans, bike trailers, and bored suburban folks, cutting across my pasture like they were paying rent. One lady even parked on my grass to let her dog pee. I went up to her, confronted her. She told me to take it up with the board. That's when something inside me just snapped. I stood there in that field, watching a place I'd spent years fixing up get turned into a highway for people who didn't know the difference between a gate latch and a garden hose. And I knew I had to do something about it. So, I started documenting everything. I took pictures. Every car that went through, every tire mark on my soil. I wrote down dates, times, license plates. I even counted the HOA security golf carts zipping through twice a day like they were on patrol. I checked the county maps, dug out the original deed from my grandpa's old tin strongbox, and what I found buried in all that legal jargon made me smile. They'd messed up. They'd stolen something they never had the right to take. And I was gonna make them pay for every single wheel rut, every inch of concrete, and every smug little wave from Karen's Range Rover as she flew through the tunnel like she owned the place. They'd taken my tunnel. Now, I was going to take back everything. The first thing I did was walk the whole length of the demolished road, with my measuring wheel and my notebook. The original road to Willowgate Estates ran from County Route 12 all the way down to the subdivision's gate, a snaking mile of pretty decent blacktop, 2 lanes, with stripes, and a pull-off for emergency vehicles and all the approved road signs that the county had given the okay for back in 2004. Sure, it was a little worn out, but it wasn't falling apart or anything. But according to the HOA's meeting minutes, which I got from a board member named Cheryl, who still owed me for pulling her truck out of the ditch last winter, bless her heart, they voted to take down and rebuild the road because of safety concerns, drainage issues, and structural integrity degradation. That was their excuse, The contract they gave out for tearing it up? $190,000 to mill and repave the whole thing, and they were even waiting for some money from the state. So, not only did they go with the more expensive option, but they didn't even try to get the financial help from the county. Why? Because it was never about fixing the road. It was about making every single person in Willowgate go through my land, under my tunnel, and right into HOA Karen's little empire. I tried going to a county zoning meeting to bring it up. I spoke during the public comments, wore a button-down shirt, kept it polite, mentioned the gate, the fence, and the unauthorized demolition. I got a lot of nods, a few sympathetic glances. Then, I watched a guy in a gray suit whisper in the ear of the zoning chair, right in the middle of the meeting. After that, nothing I said mattered. They just moved on like I'd asked about dog park hours. I left there, steaming mad. A week later, I got a letter from the zoning board, thanking me for my civic engagement, and assuring me that the matter of the HOA access infrastructure was reviewed and was compliant with county development ordinances. No signature, just a stamp. That's when I decided I was done being nice. I dug in. I took a week off work and practically lived in the records office. I brought coffee for the clerk in the morning and donuts for the one working the night shift. I pulled every map, every zoning thing, every permit, and every easement they had filed in the last 10 years. And what I found was a total mess of inconsistencies. The HOA's request to tear up the road was filed as infrastructure decommissioning, but their follow-up paperwork called the tunnel an emergency egress enhancement. They tried to say it was a fire route, but the fire department hadn't approved it, and it wasn't even on their maps. The real kicker? The tunnel had never been zoned for community traffic. Every document, from 1947 onward, listed it as a private agricultural undercrossing, non-easement, non-commercial. That means nobody, not even the county, had the right to change it for traffic unless they worked something out with me, the landowner. But it got even better. I pulled out the old floodplain. I looked at social media, and local real estate licenses, and some old obituaries. Brad and Karen are cousins. He'd rushed her tunnel application through in, 12 days, which usually takes 90. I sent an anonymous request to the county ethics board, just to see what would happen. I wasn't holding my breath. But that wasn't the only thing I found in the strongbox behind my grandpa's workshop. Wrapped in wax paper, between two property deeds, was the original land covenant from 1937. That was back when the land was first divided up from the old Eastwood Ranch. And there was a clause I'd never noticed before, probably because no one in forever had to use it. Section 4C, handwritten. It said that the livestock tunnel, built by the owner of the land, shouldn't be used for commercial or residential traffic, or as a way in or out for anyone else's land, forever. It had been signed by the original ranch owner and the county registrar. So, not only did the HOA not have an easement, the deed specifically said they couldn't do what they were doing. The clause hadn't gone away. It was permanent, set in stone, and could be enforced. I took the document to a lawyer I knew from my 4-H club days, a woman named Teresa Dale, whose firm dealt with rural property disputes. She read it twice and said, "Oh yeah, that's a kill shot." That phrase gave me chills. But I didn't want to just stop them. I wanted to make them really feel it. I wanted every single SUV that went through that tunnel to be a witness in the case. Every homeowner in the HOA needed to know who built their shortcut on a lie. So, I got to work. Cameras, trail monitors, pressure sensors, infrared lights. I mapped every single license plate that used the tunnel, the time, the traffic, and the flow. I even caught Karen's husband, Bob, using it to show off properties to potential buyers. Like it was some special entrance amenity. They were selling my tunnel as a feature. Selling it. That's when I knew it wasn't just entitlement, it was greed. They saw my land as free, a way to save money, a detour they could just pave over without following the rules. With the HOA bylaws, and even worse, backroom deals. But I had something they didn't: history. Proof. And just enough stormwater infrastructure to make them really sorry. And that's when the traps started to come together. They called it the Willow Gate Tunnel Ride, a community get-together to celebrate their new shortcut road. Flyers were posted at the HOA clubhouse. Those signs were zip-tied to mailboxes, even taped to my fence posts, like an invitation to my own execution. Karen's name was at the bottom in fancy writing. Under it, "Join us for a ceremonial drive through our beautiful new tunnel entrance." They even planned a pancake breakfast and a balloon arch at the end. That's when I knew they'd gotten too sure of themselves, too comfortable. They had gotten drunk on their own suburban fantasies. They'd paved over my property, got rid of the floodplain codes, completely cut me out of the legal process, and now they wanted to parade through my tunnel like conquering heroes. I didn't sleep much that week. Not because I was stressed, but because I was busy wiring the floodgates. I'd already sent the formal motion to the county, asking them to give me back private access and to follow the 1937 covenant. I'd even sent annotated floodplain layouts to the State Environmental Board. I had drone footage, timestamps, and 3 signed statements from neighbors, who all agreed they'd never given permission to use it, but none of that was going to stop the HOA in time, not before the tunnel ride. Bureaucracy moves slow, but revenge, well, revenge moves at flood speed. 2 weeks before, I dug out the old creek intake, a rusted steel grate buried under 30 years of dirt and poison ivy. I retrofitted it with a reinforced backflow valve I'd gotten from a condemned feed mill. Upstream, near the spring that fed Brush Creek in the wet season, I put in a second floodgate. They were pressure sealed, connected to a buried irrigation line. I'd rigged a release lever to the irrigation line and tucked it inside a hay bale on the back pasture. It was a backup system, just in case. Both gates were manual, but the release lines, they were remote. I had a little help from an electrician buddy, and I used a second-hand signal relay. That meant I could open them from my phone. I tested it twice. The pasture flooded in under 15 minutes, not enough to drown anyone, but enough to send a message, enough to make people rethink which part of the country they were trespassing through. Meanwhile, I got in touch with someone who knew what to do about a scandal. Her name was Alexi Hahn, a reporter for the county's weekly rag who had a personal problem with the HOA. One of the boards had forced her father to paint his barn taupe. I gave her everything. Photos, maps, permit issues, the cousin in code enforcement, the missing grant money that had vanished right after the road was torn up. She was so excited, she spilled coffee all over my legal binder. She said she'd be there on tunnel day, front and center, ready to record it all. I told her to bring a kayak, just in case. Then it started to rain. Not a crazy downpour, just a steady spring shower that soaked the hills and filled the culverts with that low, humming sound. The water table went up 1.5 inches overnight. That meant the tunnel would already be damp. All I had to do was open the gates. I parked my truck up on the ridge, where I could see both tunnel entrances, but nobody could see me. I brought a thermos of black coffee, my binoculars, and my granddad's old Winchester rifle, just in case some HOA vigilante tried to get all crazy. The first minivan showed up at 9:13 a.m. sharp. White Honda Odyssey, Karen's. She was wearing a plastic sash that said Board President, like she'd just been elected to Congress. Behind her, there was a line of cars, SUVs, sedans, even a couple of golf carts with streamers. One guy had strapped a giant inflatable eagle to his roof. They had no idea they were about to drive into a concrete coffin. At the far end of the tunnel, the HOA volunteers had put up a finish line with folding chairs and a portable speaker playing John Denver. Alexi was standing there with her camera. The plan was simple. Once 5 cars were in the tunnel, enough to cause a traffic jam, but not enough to cause any real damage, I'd activate both floodgates. Then, I'd hit the switch on the steel barriers I'd welded over the last 3 weeks. I'd made them out of repurposed cattle guards and a spare hydraulic jack. They were hinged, looked like livestock fencing, and built to slam shut with over 1,000 pounds of pressure. 1 gate at each end. Once they were inside, there would be no way out. Karen gave some speech at the start. I couldn't hear it, but I'm sure it was full of phrases like community vision and sustainable growth. She waved her clipboard and pointed to the tunnel. Then, the parade started. First, her Odyssey. Then a black Lexus with a vanity plate that said W Glowier. Then a Subaru with those tennis stickers. Then the HOA secretary's Toyota. Then Doug, the HOA treasurer, in his Ford Expedition, tailgating like he was late for something. That was my signal. 5 cars in. 24 wheels. $150,000 of suburbia, all sitting in my tunnel. I pulled out my phone, opened the floodgate app, and pressed release. The signal relay took 3 seconds to work. Then, the pressure valves hissed. At the same time, I pressed the second control. Both tunnel gates slammed shut with a loud clang that echoed off the ridgeline. The reaction was instant. I saw brake lights, reverse lights. 1 car honked, then 2. But the tunnel curved, and they couldn't see the water yet, not until it reached the bumpers. Then, it came. It started rising up from both ends, like the tunnel itself was exhaling. Brown, muddy runoff poured in from the pasture end. From the north, joined by clear, cold spring water. Within a minute, the water was ankle deep. After 2 minutes, it was up against the doors. At the far end, I saw the finish line volunteers scattering. 1 golf cart reversed right into a folding chair. Karen climbed out of her van and started yelling at someone behind her, probably Doug. 1 woman tried her walkie-talkie. Nothing, dead signal. I hadn't jammed it. Nature had. The water was doing what it always does, finding the easiest path. And now, that path was right through the floorboards of HOA leadership. From my ridge, I watched them panic. Watched the Ford back into the Subaru. Watched Karen waving her hands like a flight marshal, screaming at someone to do something. But there was nowhere to go. They'd blocked off the old road. They'd torn down the original gate and put all their trust in one shortcut. Now, that shortcut was a bathtub. Alexi caught it all. Every single second. Her footage would get 500,000 views and a write-up in the local paper later, but for now, I just watched, quiet, still. The coffee in my thermos was still warm. The rain kept coming. The water rose. And finally, Karen looked up towards the ridge, towards me, and realized who had pulled the lever on her empire. I tipped my hat and started walking down. Not to rescue them. Just to say hello. The sirens came long after the screaming stopped. Flashing lights bounced off the tunnel's concrete curves as the fire crews waded through knee-deep water with bolt cutters, thermal cameras, and a whole lot of questions. I stood to the side, arms crossed, soaked, but dry where it mattered. I'd already opened the floodgates. No need for any real harm. Just enough water to make a point. Even after the water drained, the tunnel still stank of humiliation. Karen was the last one they pulled out. She was wrapped in a metallic blanket like a war casualty, barking orders at a firefighter half her age who couldn't stop laughing. The Range Rover, bless its over-engineered heart, wouldn't start. The water had shorted the electronics, and by the time the rescue crew got it to the tunnel entrance, it was dead. I heard someone say, "That's what happens when you cut corners on permits," and I may have smiled. That night, Alexi's video aired on the 10 o'clock news. It was between a story about a runaway emu and a school board recall. Tunnelgate, they called it. The video was unedited. Karen's voice echoed off the tunnel walls as the water gurgled around her knees, the chaos of the cars, and the HOA board members climbing onto their roofs like kids playing hot lava. But it was the follow-up piece that really did the damage. Alexi didn't just film the event. She dug deeper. She interviewed the county engineer who had flagged the floodplain violation. The former treasurer, who confirmed Karen had rushed the road demolition funds to her cousin's construction company. She even talked to a clerk at the zoning office who admitted that she'd been pushed to ignore the missing paperwork. The piece ended with drone footage of the tunnel, now all warped and waterlogged, and the words, "built on a lie." Within 48 hours, the HOA board was in full retreat. Karen tried to do damage control. She put out a statement blaming the weather and miscommunication. But nobody believed it. Not after all the public records were out. Not after the county froze the HOA's bank accounts while they did an audit. Not after Alexi got her hands on the grant forms and showed how the costs were completely messed up between the demo and what the road actually was. That was enough for the DA. Karen was indicted on 3 counts of municipal fraud, 1 count of faking public records, and, my favorite, criminal trespass. She pleaded not guilty, of course. She hired a lawyer from a couple of counties over, but the evidence was stacked higher than the HOA's landscaping violation notices. The court date was set before summer was even over. Meanwhile, I filed my own lawsuit. Trespass, property damage, and unauthorized changes to the agricultural infrastructure. It took 3 weeks, but I won. Full damages. The court ordered that the tunnel access be fixed. And, to top it all off, an injunction was put in place, so the HOA couldn't do any construction within 500 feet of my property line. The HOA tried to appeal. They lost. Then, they tried to get back together. They called an emergency board meeting to elect a new president, but only 2 members showed up, and 1 quit mid-meeting. The reporters started asking about the missing HOA funds. Without leadership and the fraud trial coming up, the county decided to dissolve the HOA. Karen's empire fell apart in less than a month. The tunnel? Declared unsafe for public use and was permanently closed to cars. But not to me. I had the deed, the ruling, and my welding torch. I hired a local metalworker named Denny. He helped me install the floodgates, and together, we put in a new gate. Not automatic. Not electric. Just a good, old-fashioned steel bar gate with a padlock and a sign that said, "Private access. Trespassers will be educated." Then, the mural. I painted it myself. The Thompson kids, who used to play by my creek, helped me. It went from the edge to edge of the tunnel wall. In the center was a cartoon of a sinking SUV, the water up to its mirrors, with the words, "The shortcut to consequences," in big, bold red letters. On either side, I drew Karen and her board members in these crazy, panicky poses, one holding a clipboard like a life raft, and another trying to paddle with a garden flag. The community loved it. So much that the local arts council nominated it for a Civic Engagement Award. But the real prize came quietly. No ceremony. Just a letter from the Township Zoning Committee, asking if I'd like to be an alternate board member. Your knowledge of land use law and floodplain. Willowgate Estates changed after that. Without an HOA, the place just chilled out. Neighbors planted what they wanted. Kids drew hopscotch on the sidewalks, and nobody got fined for leaving their trash cans out all night. Some people left, afraid of what a neighborhood without rules might look like. But more people stayed. And the ones who stayed thanked me. They brought pies, left handwritten notes. One kid even gave me a Lego model of the tunnel, with a tiny Karen figure trapped inside. And then, there was the Range Rover. It was still half underwater at the bottom of the tunnel. It was wedged between two wheel ruts like a monument to arrogance. Karen never came to get it. I heard she moved to Florida. Bought a condo where only beige curtains were allowed. I left the Rover right there. Let the creek slowly take it back. Ivy grew in the wheel wells. Birds made nests in the cup holders. On warm afternoons, I'd climb the hill, sit on top of the tunnel gate with a cup of sweet tea, and watch the sun hit its shattered windshield. The town said it was an eyesore. I called it justice. And every time the breeze blew and I got a whiff of the flooded leather seats and the overpriced suburban ego, I leaned back, took a sip, and smiled.